Well, hello, trail travelers. I'm here at the Edge Automotive 4x4 Center, and we are getting Optimus re-geared. We've been running on 38s for a while, and gotta say, it's not the funnest experience. It's a little slower. I never see, eighth gear, sometimes I don't even see seventh gear anymore. The gas mileage is down, the performance is down, and we're gonna explain why that happens and why re-gearing is gonna fix it. So we're gonna get Optimus into the shop and get things started. So stay right there. We'll be right back. All right, we got Optimus up on the lift. We got the tie rod taken off. We're draining the front differential. Now I think it'd be a good time to talk about what we are doing to the Jeep here. And put simply, we're re-gearing it, right?
Absolutely.
And why would someone want to re-gear?
Well, when you add a larger tire, you add the weight of a winch, bumpers, armor, gear that you're bringing, the recovery gear, things like that. It takes a toll on the performance of the Jeep, okay, particularly the larger tire size.
Well, that's going to change the final drive ratio.
100%. Now with yours, as much off-road bias as you have, we decided to go to the 538 gears, which is going to be tremendous with those tires.
Because remember, I'm running 38-inch tires, and stock, the Jeep came with 35s, and I originally had gone to 37s, and right then I could feel a performance loss. From acceleration, I started losing my eighth gear, and then when I upgraded to the 38s, I don't think I've seen eighth gear since then, and now seventh is a little, it comes and goes when it wants to, but I'm just not getting the RPMs up there to get into those higher gears. So I'm losing performance on the freeway, I'm losing gas mileage, and my takeoff speed and stuff, it feels like a slug. And so this is really going to make a big difference. This is going to get me back to a lot closer to stock gearing.
Yeah.
Because we're changing the gears in the differentials, which will affect the final gear because of the tires. Hopefully that makes some sense.
Absolutely. And Kerry, one point, and again, on the road, you make a good point. Those upper gears, the overdrives, you're not really being able to utilize those. This is going to help that. But when you put this in low, it's going to want to move.
Well, she moves. She doesn't move very quickly these days, and if you go to 40s, you're making the problem even worse. Those larger tires, you're just going to find you got to re-gear at some point. And I know people go on their stock gears all the way to 40s. It's just not a good thing. It's harder on the engine. It's harder on the transmission. Get it right, get the performance back, and get the feel back that you want, and improve your on-road and off-road performance.
Yes.
So we decided we were going to go with the 530H, which is a deeper gear than most people would go to on here. Most people would go to maybe a 513, but the 538 is going to give us a little more oomph at the beginning and should be a little funner. If this was still my daily driver, that decision might have been a little different. We might have stuck with the 513s, but now it's really just a weekend vehicle, so that other performance, I think, is going to be more beneficial in the long run.
You bet. And when you get into that slow-moving, rock crawling, little bit more of the technical stuff, Kerry, you'll really appreciate the deeper gear.
So, from the expert, I'm going to take his advice, and we're going to go 538s. So what do we have here on the table?
So what you've got are 2 sets of gear, ring and pinions, and that's in the Yukon boxes, and then 2 master kits. And we went ahead and went with the Dana Spicer master install kits and the Yukon gears, which are brutally strong. We've had awesome luck with them. They set up well, they hold up very well, and just a top line product. Highly recommend the Yukon stuff.
What is actually in this kit?
So that's going to come with.
We understand ring and pinion.
And when we get a little bit further into the install, you'll be able to see that. But that's going to have all bearings. So it's going to be pinion bearings, carrier bearings. It's going to be all of your bolts, ring gear bolts, shims. Really going to be everything needed to set that differential up.
So it's not just reusing some of the additional parts.
Correct.
We're putting on new parts to go along with the new gears.
Correct. And some shops do that. They'll kind of cut corners, do that stuff. we really prefer to replace everything. That way you got all brand new stuff.
Which is great. I like that we're going to that extra level of detail. And this is a good point or a good point or spot to bring up, why is it here? And I have done most of the work on here. Now, I helped with the lift. We did it at a shop because I didn't have a lift. But everything else, all the suspension work, I've done myself, just sitting in the garage. But when it comes to doing differentials and changing these gears, sure, you can unbolt them, put new stuff in, but it's a lot more precise than that. I mean, we're talking thousandths of an inch of, tolerances, right? So to not have the right tools or the experience to do it, if things aren't set up right, you can run into some serious problems. And what are some of the things that could happen if they're not installed properly?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, least of all, they could be very noisy. Okay.
That's the best case.
That's best case scenario. and they live. Okay. Usually those don't live long. Okay. And we fix a lot of those, things that come in. People think they're going to do them at home, or they've got a friend that's got they've done work on their own Jeep. Okay. So you want somebody that's A, qualified, B, trained, and C, that has all the correct tooling. Okay. That's huge.
That's a biggie for me. I don't have the tools. I don't have the experience or the know-how. Yes, there are YouTube videos that will show you how to do it. But again, it comes down to the nuances of doing this properly. And I've been thinking about doing gears since the day I went to 37s. Took me a while to finally pull the plug on it because it's not a super cheap install. I mean, you're talking generally in the $1,500 range, right?
Yeah, for the labor side.
And then you're picking out your gears and doing all that. It just took me a while to just get around to pulling the plug on it. And when we did, I decided, okay, I'm going to go to a shop that has the best reputation in Colorado for doing this type of work. And well, that's why we're here.
Oh, thanks.
Right? So Chris, I've known Chris for a while. We've talked about doing this on and off. Now it's time to get her done because I'm really sick of the performance with the 38s. So next up, we'll dig in, we'll get the covers off, and throughout the install, we'll be talking to Noah, who is going to be our installer, and get some tips and tricks from him about some of the things that go into this build, which are the reasons why you don't want to do it yourself. Yeah. And so I think that's going to be an interesting topic for a lot of you who want to get into regearing, or you need to get yours regeared for the purposes that we've talked about. And we'll see exactly why this is not a do-it-yourself project.
Yep. Yeah, and I'll tell you what, you will be surprised at what goes into making this job go smoothly. And he does a fantastic job.
Well, great. Let's finish digging in.
Let's do it.
Let's get some gears going.
All right.
As I said, we got Noah over here doing the actual work. We've got the cover off, we've got it drained. And notice we have the axles pulled. And that's because you have an axle shaft that comes in here and connects to all this stuff. So you have to remove that in order to pull these gears out. So it's more than just taking the cover off and swapping gears. There's a lot of work to go into it. Now, he did pull the tie rod off, which was more just to have easy access to all this, but you do have to pull the axles out, which means taking the brakes off, which, you see there's a good amount of disassembly going on here that needs to be done. So, yeah, at first it seems pretty simple when you're just talking, oh, it's just two gears that need to be swapped out. But as you'll see, there's quite a bit more to it than that.
And then they made the other side much larger. That's the one that takes majority of the load. We'll get new bearings on that guy anyways. That way you can't get your shims crisscrossed either.
That's probably a good thing.
Yep, on the older models, they're the same size, left to right side, so pretty easy to get them mixed up, and that's the easy way to make everything go really downhill really fast.
Now, fortunately, these look like they're in pretty good shape.
They do.
Not too shabby. For all the abuse we put Optimus through, not too bad. Now, one other thing that's got to get pulled off is the drive shaft. You need to have all this stuff loose so you can get to those gears and get everything aligned properly. So he's gonna tie that up there and get it out of the way. And yeah, we do have a few scratches on that bad boy. So
a rock or two.
maybe something that we're looking to replacing down the road, but otherwise not in too bad a shape. But now we've got all the gears out. We've got the drive shaft off. We're making some good progress here on the front end, and then you get to do it all on the back end. Now, one tip here, if you ever need to pull your drive shaft off, don't be like a friend of ours and do it on a steep driveway without the tires chocked. This Jeep ended up in the middle of the road. So don't do that.
There she is.
In pretty good shape there too.
Not too bad looking. No chunks out of it, no excess metal, so she was doing her job.
Now, one thing I do that may be slight overkill for some people is I do change my diff oil like every 20,000 miles. We're off-roading, it's getting wet. You know, often we've submerged it a couple times. So where some people can go a lot longer than that, it's something I do as a kind of a regular maintenance. About every 4 or 5 oil changes, I go ahead and do it. It may be a little overkill, but I think for what we do to this poor Jeep, it's a good preventive maintenance. So you see, sometimes the pieces come apart well, and other times they don't. And this is one of those times where it took a little persuasion to get the parts off. And this is why we're going with the whole master kit, because it comes with these replacement parts. So we don't really need to worry about making sure they come off easy. Get them off, put brand new ones on, not have any problems. But now we've got a nice clean setup here. And we're slowly but surely making some progress. Now, good thing no one knows what he's doing, because I sure as hell don't know anything about this stuff.
So on these carriers, pulling these off, whole top part comes off, I just flip it over. That guy just free spins. This guy will free spin as well. It's this cage down here that they say needs to be installed in the exact same position that it came off of. So I'll clean all this up, put a paint mark here, and probably just run it all over the place. So if it ever gets wiped off or anything, I always have a lot of surface area to see that paint mark. I haven't put one in backwards yet, so I don't know what happens when you don't line that back up, but I don't want to find out.
Now, let's get it done right, which is why I'm having someone else do it. Well, as we said, sometimes it's not just the know-how, it's having the right tools.
Exactly.
And that's not one that I have in my garage.
Usually people don't. It's just a bearing puller, and that's how it's supposed to come off, this bearing, and not like the other side. So it just makes life easier and a lot cleaner, and then you don't have to cut every single bearing off, or it just makes life easier. Clean and easy.
So far, so good. As you can see, we still haven't even got the gears off yet. We're getting close to getting the gears off, but there's a lot of disassembly involved in this, from not just on the vehicle side with the suspension and the axles and things, but the differential takes quite a bit of effort to get down to actually getting to the actual gears. So it's, as I said at the beginning, this is not just pull some stuff off, slap new gears in, and you're ready to go. This is a lot of work involved in just getting to the point of being able to swap the gears themselves. So we're getting close. All right, so now we've got things kind of disassembled, and next up is trying to start putting things back, right?
Yeah, we're just prepping for our setup process pretty much. So this was the old race that came out of it. On the JLs and JTs, they put the pinion depth shim behind the race instead of behind the pinion bearing on the pinion itself. So I just made myself a nice little setup race here so it can slide in and out easily, so I don't have to press the new one in and out, in and out, in and out until I get my pinion depth right. Hopefully it's right off the bat, so I don't have to do as much measuring and math, but it does make life easier. Very important, by the way.
So that's one of those things or when we talk about not doing this yourself and having someone that knows what they're doing to do this, because if you press that in and things weren't right,
you got to unpress it again. You got another chance to mess up the housing, another chance to mess up your race,
right?
Another chance, and this always doesn't guarantee you just slap this in. It's the right depth every single time. It's going to vary, especially with new gears. It's going to change a lot of the stuff because, well, yeah, machining is pretty close. It doesn't get it perfect 100% every time.
Right, and we're down to really tight tolerances. You don't want to mess anything up. You put that in there, and now we go back and we check everything later, and if something's off, now you're knocking things back out, and it's just not a good thing. So I like his little thing he's got going on here. It's going to make life a whole lot easier getting things back into position and making sure that it's all correct.
Exactly.
Excellent. We'll let him get back to work. Okay, we got the gears in now. Well, basically the differentials back in now. And this is where things get really tricky. You got to make sure there's enough backlash. You got to make sure that everything is set up properly, that things mesh properly. If it's off at all, you're going to have some problems down the road. So what is it that we're doing right now?
Right now we're checking for backlash just to see.
And what does that mean?
So pretty much that's just the play. So you get that little tick in here. So that's just the distance that the ring gear has between the pinion back there. So if it's too much, then it's going to jack up your pattern too, and it's just kind of.
If it's too much, the gears are going to.
It's going to weaken things up.
They're going to slap, right?
Yeah, you get that slap, and it's just not going to be as strong. So we want to get that guy within spec, and then once we can get that guy within spec.
And how tight of tolerances are we talking here?
So the spec for these guys, you want it between like 6 thousandths and let's see. According to Spice, the ring gear backlash on these guys is about 3 thousandths to 6 thousandths where you want it. So you got 3 thousandths of play in there. Usually, if you can get them, I always shoot for, I want at least 4 or 5 at the bottom line, and at the high end 7, 8, sometimes 9 it's acceptable, but I always try to get it within that 5 to 8 range.
And how is that adjusted?
So this is adjusted, so you got the 2 shims on the outside of the carrier here, so they're not interchangeable. We got the one big bearing and the one small bearing. So if we wanted to decrease our backlash, like if we had too much, then we would want to take away from the shim over here and add to over here. So what you do over here, you got to do over here. It's kind of like a fraction in a sense. So let's see. So pretty much, yeah, then if we wanted to increase it, yeah, then we just go back the other way. And then, so right now we're sitting about, let's see. 3, 4, 5, 6. So right now we're about 8,000, so we're actually pretty good on our backlash here. And because we do have some good backlash and we're within that area, we'll go ahead and run a pattern now to see where our pinion depth is at, see if we got to add or take away from that guy.
Good deal. See, learn something new every day. I don't know anything about how these things go together, so it's been pretty educational for me as well, but still not something I want to do myself for sure. Again, the knowledge, the experience, and the right tools. So if you've ever seen pictures of someone who's done some gears, you'll see this like yellowish paste type stuff going on, and that's what he's doing here. And kind of, what is this all about here now?
So this is how we see our pattern of where our pinion is laying down on our ring gear. So we'll paint this guy up, spin it around, give it a little tension, a little extra preload, and it'll dig into this paint, and then we can see where we're making contact on our ring gear. Make sure we're in the strongest place possible and within spec.
So this is one of those things you don't want to mess up on, because again, if it's not enough, you're going to have problems. If it's too much, you're going to have problems. You need things dialed in just right. And if this needs to be adjusted, that's where we're going to add some shims on either side,
so
right?
We can, so pretty much for this guy with our pattern, that's going to mainly change with our pinion depth. So once we run our pattern, we'll see what it looks like, and that'll tell us if we need to, take away from our pinion depth or add to it, or the factory shim might still be close enough or good enough to just run a perfect pattern on our first shot. Doesn't happen every time. Usually rarely happens, but when it does, it's awesome. So
we're going to hope for the best here.
We're going to hope for the best here and hope this pattern looks great. We'll spin it around back until we can get in our zone, and then what I like to do, learn this little trick from an old guy. Makes your life easier. Wrap this around the back end here, give yourself some extra tension. Then you just take the wrench, move this guy up and down. If you can keep a wrench on it. Or your hand. Some days works better than others. So then you can see on this guy how our pattern's showing here, and this pattern is showing way off here, so we are off. So we are going to have to make adjustments to our pinions. Really, they can classify as acceptable being too far out or too far in. It's just of where this is laying down. You can see how it's kind of towards the edge over here. And it's not super far out. I would just like to get it in a little bit closer for my personal preference. So we're gonna pull it all back out and take that shim out from behind that race and measure it, see what it reads, and add to it or take away from it, and run a pattern again and see what happens.
So what we were looking for was these markings to be a little bit more centered on those gears right there. It's not bad. It's on the, probably on the outside of the, or just at the acceptable range, but he's going to try and make it dead on perfect.
A little bit more off for the tooth back there. Now we have paint all the way around the tooth. And then when you look at the bottom, same as well. Now the pinion's making contact more in on the ring gear. So it's definitely a lot better, and you can see it's clearly away from the outer edge. It's not towards the inner edge, and it's not completely buried inside. So the bottom side looks really good. Top side is now more deeper in. It didn't bring the pattern more out towards the center of the ring gear, but it did bring it more into the ring gear more, so it'll make it stronger. So therefore it's not riding on the outer edge. So I definitely think that did help, especially down here. So it is an acceptable pattern. It's not perfectly squared or lined up, But it is now more deep in that ring gear, so I feel a lot better about the strength of it now. So
Yeah, took a couple little of adjustments to get everything dialed in just perfectly. And now, time for final assembly. Get everything torqued back down, closed up, and get some fluid in this thing. And then it's time to start on the rear. Now the front's all buttoned up here, and now Noah's taking the rear apart, getting that all ready to get the gears swapped out. Yes, you do need to do both the front and the rear at the same time. You can't have different gears, you know, for front and rear, do one at one point and do the other later. Now you got to do them both at the same time. But the front's done. Now it's time to get dirty, get the rear done. Well, sometimes things go super good, sometimes they don't. Right now, it's this guy right here, does not want to come off. Try as we might, that thing just does not want to budge. Probably going to have to cut it off, but it's a good thing that the Dana Spicer master kit comes with all new bolts, so cutting it off, not a big deal because we have brand new ones to put on there, but we still got to get this one off. Well, we're in the home stretch now. Got the new ring gear on. It's getting the last bits reassembled here. The locker's got to go on now, and the last little bits, and then it's going to be time to get this one reinstalled in the rear, button everything up, and she's going to be done. I'm getting kind of excited to see what this is going to feel like with the new gears in it. I thought it'd be interesting to show the difference between the original 410 gears. This is the pinion gear over here, and the 538 gear over here. Looking at the ring gear, it's kind of hard to tell the difference. I mean, you can see when they're side by side, but this gear really shows the difference between the two. And the big reveal. Look at that.
oh yeah. No, I guess I put a lot of paint on there.
All right, well, the gear job is all finished up. He's out there doing a little drive right now.
Yeah.
It didn't go, you know, perfectly smooth, but when do they ever, right? We had a little bolt problem, not a big deal, easy to solve. But now the question is, what do I do now? How do I make sure that they're broken in properly and that I take care of them?
Yeah, so initially, once the install's done, we do 3 heat cycles. So we'll do a small loop, intermediate loop, and then we'll do a little bit larger loop, and then we turn it back over to you. That first 500 miles is the most critical. Obviously, the first 100 is really the first part. The first part. And we've talked about that. But, you know, and with your driving style and it being cool out there, I'd say, you know, drive it 15, 20 miles, let it, you know, rest a little bit, let it cool off, and just get that 500-mile break in. And you want to avoid, you know, heavy loads, things of that nature, and off-road until we get that oil changed.
Right. Yeah. I mean, today's Tuesday. I have a 60-mile drive to work each way. We'll take it nice and easy, keep it under like 60 miles an hour, and then over the weekend we'll finish off those mileage on maybe nothing more than a dirt road or something, and then we'll bring it back next week. Yeah. And then what do you do when I bring it back in?
So when you bring it back, we're going to go ahead and we're going to drain that dyno fluid that's in it now, move it over to synthetic, and then you're good to go.
Sounds easy enough.
Simple.
All right.
Huh?
Thanks much, man.
You bet.
I'm looking forward to getting in this thing and seeing how it performs with these 538s. It's kind of a deep gear, but should be well worth it.
Yeah, it's going to work real well.
Awesome. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. This has been Kerry with Trail Traveler here with Chris at the Edge Automotive. If you need gears done, it's the only place I trust. Make sure you come here.
Let's do it.